this evening of history. I want to start by just highlighting this is the 150th year of the founding, the official founding of this parish, Ascension Memorial Church. So throughout this year, we've been stopping to make a bit of a fuss about that and have various programs, events, and we have tonight this historical perspective given. Introduction by way of confession. I was well into my 20s when I began to believe that history actually happened. I knew that, and I read in books that things like the Civil War and, George Washington and all that stuff that is history was really hard for me to believe. It was all sort of secondhand knowledge. And it really wasn't until, and I sort of bowed to Ken Burns and his Civil War series that made me a believer. Because he so beautifully researched all the facts and figures and events and wars and of the Civil War, and then wove those together so powerfully and so beautifully that I was brought into that story and I relived that moment in history. I was transported to that reality. And so I've now become such a believer in history and invite you tonight to sort of settle in and sort of open your heart and your mind. We have Scott Jewell from our high school and Jane Caroline from this parish, both believers in history, both who have done their homework and with some passion want to share with you this part of our history in Ipswich, 1867, 150 years ago, and what was happening both within the town and how this church came to be in the midst of all that with a bit of help from the Appleton family. So that's all I'm going to share with you. Thank you. Is it Kira?
Kiana.
Kiana, who is filming this with the ICAM technology, because there are those who reached out to me and said, Brad, is there any chance this is going to be recorded? Because I can't be there, but I really want to absorb this history, this evening of history. So without further ado, Scott and Jane, you're on.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming this evening. I hope you can hear me all the way in the back. I think the microphone's working. All right, so what I want to start off this evening is actually thinking about 1852. I have a map of 1852 of downtown Ipswich, and just kind of want to show you a couple highlights of different spots. One thing I thought was pretty neat was what we call County Street today was not County Street back then. It actually didn't connect. This is Mill Street. It goes all the way to Sawmill Point, which is just right around the corner here, and then it stops at the river. And this is the oldest industrial site in Ipswich. This goes back to 1635 or so. But we did not have what's called County Street, so we had Mill Street, and if you look all the way over here, once you get past Green Street, you can see we have called Cross Street. That's also County Street today. So there was nothing that connected it back then. A couple other things I want to point out is downtown Ipswich is not where it is today. In 1852, it was on top of the hill. It was up by the First Church. A couple things I want to point out is the Treadwell Hotel, which is right there. That's the Treadwell Hotel. You got one of those pointy things?
Yeah.
Oh, this is awesome. Now, let's see. Oh, look at that. Okay. So we have, here's the Treadwell Hotel. Another fun thing that I thought was pretty neat was the Female Academy. That was the first, it was the first female school in the United States. Here it is on the corner of North Main Street next to the Choke Bridge, in case you don't know anywhere in town. Another interesting thing would be the probate court right here. The probate court is the federal court in Ipswich. It is most likely the location where the Ipswich Custom House was. What else we've got here? It's always entertaining to talk about the county jail. So this is the jail in the county house down here where the town hall is today. But it was a jail from 1650 all the way until 1920s. So this is the jail and county house. And so I just wanted to point out in 1852, here it is, Mill Street stops here at Sawmill Point, and then there is no County Street. There's this cross street where you know today. Then I want to look a little further ahead in time to 1872. What I'm basically trying to cover is 1867, but I figured let's just look at both ends. So here's 20 years later, the town of Ipswich. It looks slightly different. Let's start with the street that's up in front of us. This is County Street. It is now called County Street. They built a bridge here, and it connected all the way to Cross Street. Now we are in the Episcopal Church here. There are some things, highlights here. Right now we have the Ipswich Woolen Mill, which would be on the corner. You can see the foundation today, but it's someone's yard now. Let's see. We've got the Episcopal Church. The library, the one right behind us. Well, here it is. This is the library right here. This is what used to be the the federal courthouse. That is now a drugstore. What else we've got? The Methodist Church next door existed in 1872. And then we changed the name to the House of Correction and Insane Asylum down here at the town hall. The Long Church, yes, I'm sorry. I assume everybody realized this. This is the first church. This would be the fourth of the first churches. I think there are 7 now. This is the fourth one, if I remember right. It's 1872. All right, now I'm just going to show some pictures. Let's start with this thing. Ipswich was a port town. From 1635 all the way to about 1840, Ipswich was a port town. We had the Port of Ipswich. There was a custom house here from 1700 all the way to 1844. So for 143 years, there was a custom house in Ipswich. It did belong to the British back for the Revolution, and then after the Revolution, we had a custom district. We had 3 different custom house collectors over the last 40 years or so. And you can see the steamship Carlotta. This is about 1875. And then there's a 3-mast ship coming up through the Ipswich River. And that's how ships used to come up the river. They would come up, I'll slow it down. Before the invention of the steamship, ships used to come up the river. They used to use rowboats to get them close to into the river, and then they had a series of tow paths on the north side of the river. And they would take horses or donkeys, mules, and drag the ships along the tow paths to bring it all the way up into the port of Ipswich. What is the port of Ipswich? It is from the town wharf all the way to the Great Cove. If you talk about 1750, most of the port is over here in what we call the Great Cove. Ships that came up the Ipswich River only had a draft of about 5 to 7 feet, which at high tide, you can easily get a ship this size up the river because it's only 7 feet underwater. These are centerboards, which basically they lower a keel down once they're out sailing in the open ocean, but they can pull it up and they only have a draft of about 5 to 7 feet. And so most of the wharfs were over here in what we call Great Cove. There were a couple along the river down towards the wharf area, but most of them were up here from 1750 on. Let's see. This is an interactive conversation. If you have questions, please raise your hand or just shout out if you'd like.
So the Great Cove was that body of water between
Thank you.
the shore?
I'm sorry. I know my way around town. I should make sure there. Great Cove is this. If we are currently sitting right about there, we can go out the street to the parking lot and walk down to the County Street Bridge. This is called Great Cove right here. This is called Sawmill Point. It's a nice place to go and sit and have a picnic. And you can wander around this part on Turkey Shore Road. It used to be known as Prospect Street. You can see that this is the cove. There was a shipyard here. There was 1, 2, 3 wharfs on this side. There was a wharf down here. Then there's a wharf further down. So most of the town wharfs were in what we call Great Cove. And the Great Cove silted up over time. When they, in the 1920s, when they built the dam to back up the water in the town, a lot of the sand just kind of backed up, and now the Great Cove you look today is quite sandy. It wasn't, 1850, 1870. So, this is what, ask more questions. Yes?
What about the Green Street Bridge? Was that there?
The Green Street Bridge is the newest bridge in the town of Ipswich. It was built in 1894. They had proposals from 1870s on to build it. It took a couple tries, and that Green Street Bridge is actually the third bridge at that site. That was another talk I did not too
And
long
does
ago.
that represent those large
Yeah.
ships?
At that point, by the 1870s, the ships were not coming up to the Great Cove. They were down along Water Street and then where the wharf is today. So I figured, let's talk about what did people actually do when this was the port of Ipswich. Well, this is John and George Hurd's distillery. And this is at the Great Cove. Right here, this wharf right here still exists today. You can stand right down there and you can see it. It's on the corner of, let me flip back to my map. It is on, is that called Elm Street these days? It is right in this corner right here, of the S in Prospect. That is where the wharf is today. This is Turkey Shore, and the distillery was on this side of the street here. So why do I bring up the distillery? Because, well, most of what was being shipped out here was coast-wide shipping. What does that mean? Well, basically, local fishermen go get cod and mackerel. They would come in, back to Ipswich. They would dry it out on the stages. That would be like down by past the wharf, all the marshes areas. They would dry the fish there. Then they put them in barrels, load those barrels on a ship here in Ipswich, and they would sail it down to the Caribbean. That is coast-wide shipping. Anywhere, basically from the Canadian Maritimes all the way down to the Caribbean was coast-wide shipping. So George Hurd and John Hurd would go and send a ship full of fish down to the Caribbean. Obviously, that was there to feed the slaves that were down in the Caribbean. They were going and processing sugarcane to make molasses. They would take the same barrels, empty them of the fish, they would load them up with barrels of molasses. They would put it back on the same ship, sail it right back up the coast, right down here into the Great Cove. They would unload those barrels of molasses, roll it into the distillery, they would make rum. Then they would go and get new clean barrels and load up the rum, put it on the ship again. This time they would leave Ipswich and go over to Liverpool, England, or they would go to the Netherlands. They would basically go to Europe from here. They would go and sell the rum for manufactured goods. They would take those manufactured goods, they would head down to the coast of, west coast of Africa. They would trade the manufactured goods for the local slaves. They'd bring those slaves from West Africa over to the Caribbean, to the same islands where they had to bring down the fish to, so that they'd have more people to go and be slaves to go and process the sugarcane to make molasses. So we were involved in all of that here in Ipswich. And that's part of our legacy of here. So we used the port of Ipswich, and it was coast-wide shipping. Most of what came into Ipswich after the Revolutionary War would be lumber. We had a series of sawmills. There was a sawmill on Sawmill Point, of course. We had the molasses, we had grain. So we had a grist mill right next door, right over here by the bridge. They would go and process grain coming into Ipswich. And then we would have coal. And we had a lot of coal that came into Ipswich. If you go from 1850 all the way to 1900 or just after 1900, most of the coal arrived by ship. It was just cheapest to do that. So we were a port town.
Where was the coal coming from?
Where was the coal coming from? Philadelphia. It was coming from, no, West Virginia's later. West Virginia, and then all that West Virginia coal going to Norfolk would be about 1880s, 1890s, and that was much larger operations. The stuff that came to Ipswich would be out of Philadelphia, out of New York, it would be out of New Jersey, and also the Canadian Maritimes. Moncton, Nova Scotia would be a place that was a very easy place to get to for coal. Most of the lumber was coming out of the other half of Massachusetts, also known as Maine. And the grain would be coming from the Hudson River Valley. It would be coming up through Long Island Sound and around Cape Cod and up to us.
What about salt hay? What does that mean?
Salt hay, that was an export, and most of that traveled by gondolas. We built, from about 1650s on, we built a series of canals that connected the salt marshes from Gloucester all the way to Portsmouth. And they would go and have these things called gondolas. Think barges, big flat barges with a sail and a pole. And they would move these hay and other goods all around from Gloucester all the way to Portsmouth, all in the interior, never going out into the open ocean. They would go along the tidal rivers and the tidal flats. One of the great examples of that would be if you go through the Annisquam River and you go to the Gloucester Harbor, that little cut through, that is a great example of one of the canals they did. Fox Creek Canal is one of those. The canal that goes and connects, if you go on the backside of Plum Island and you go up to Newburyport, I can't remember the name of that little creek right there, that is an example of a man-made creek for that part. So here is a later photograph. Oh, let's see, that's got to be about 1890-ish. And that is where the town wharf is today. Most people will recognize Ringbolt Rock. This is one of 4 of the Ringbolt Rocks where they would go in to get a ship around the corner. They would go and throw a rope on that and spin the ship around that. There was 4 of them along the way. Most people recognize this building here, that building there, this building there, all exist today. And people love to talk about this right here. This building, somebody in the 1950s claimed it was the Ipswich Custom House. It is not. It is the ticket office for the steamship Carlotta. The Carlotta's docks right here, that's the ticket office. By the way, that building still exists today. It is currently sitting, what used to be LA Fuel, now it's Stein, that's their office. So it got moved over there. All right, so this is the port.
Was there a custom house there?
There is no custom house. We have no idea, we have no formal records of where the custom house of Ipswich was. But my hypothesis, it's only an idea I can test, is that since what is now Oddfellows building, since that was the federal court, it would make sense that you would have the custom house in a federal building. That's the only federal building besides the post office across the way. So it's just a guess. I cannot prove it. I've been trying for years. And then I can't talk about Ipswich. So we were a port town. Then we became a manufacturing town. And here's probably the most famous example of manufacturing. This is Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Appleton. They went and built a cotton mill. This stone building is the original cotton mill. This is at Upper Falls. You call that EBSCO today. Matter of fact, that bridge right there is in the exact same spot where the Riverwalk is today. What's left of this dam, you can see underneath the Riverwalk Bridge, you'll see a pile of cut stone and a lot of rubble there. That's where that came from. And so that is the original, this is the 3rd dam at this site from 1650 on, 1635 on. And so this is Mr. Lawrence Appleton, and this is the Ipswich Manufacturing Company. They made cotton cloth from 1828. So this building was built in 1828. The dam, this current dam right there was built in 1828. It's easier to spot this dam because it has 2 supports for the walkway versus the later dam which only has 1 support. Then in 1868, this was bought up and they turned it into the Ipswich Mills Company and they made hosiery. We call it socks. When you hear the word hosiery, think socks. Specifically tall socks. That was the fashion. So this is the town of Ipswich before this building was built. And this is the town after this building was built. So we're talking about the railroad. The railroad became one of the very first railroads built in the United States. I think this is the 5th or 6th railroad built in the United States, connected Boston with Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And it came right through Ipswich. And it came through Ipswich in fall of 1837. And this is called the Eastern Railroad. And when the railroad came in, the town of Ipswich moved. What we call downtown, when we were a port town, was on top of the hill here. When we became a railroad town, the town of Ipswich moved down the hill. They filled in the swamps by Kimball Brook. There's a brook that runs underneath all the streets down there. They filled in the swamps. They made what we call Central Street, and the entire downtown moved down the hill because it was closer to the railroad. Then Town Hall moved from the top of the hill down the hill. So Ipswich changed. That's why I titled this talk, Ipswich in Transition. This is the biggest change in Ipswich when we went from a port town into a railroad town. So, and the original investor in the Eastern Railroad was a guy named Appleton. Yeah, he's on the original board of directors. He took some of the money he made on shipping, and he went and invested in this new thing, technology called railroads. He also invested in this thing called cotton mills. No. Unfortunately, none of them.
Okay.
Though I do know the people that tore them down, and I wish they hadn't. Anyways, now our local story for this building. This building wouldn't exist without this story here, the County Street Bridge. So, the County Street Bridge was built in 1861. This is the third bridge across the Ipswich River. Obviously, the Choke Bridge is the oldest. Mill Road is the second oldest. This one here on County Street is the third one. It was built in 1861. It connected the south part of town to the north part of town, and it allowed us to extend Mill Road and turn it all the way to Cross Street, so we made this thing called County Street. I had a little bit of fun. Where did it come from? I had fun finding out where the actual bridge was manufactured. This is a quarry over in Flatledge Quarry in Rockport. So the granite for that bridge came from Rockport. They had to hand cut it and hand carve it all. This is the actual quarry where it came from. So they manufactured right there in Rockport. Then they moved it by horses. And they had little carts. They would roll it down to the waterfront. Then they would take a stone sloop, load it onto a stone sloop, and sail it from Rockport around Cape Ann all the way up to the port of Ipswich. They pulled up right to what we now call Sawmill Point. Took the boom of the sloop and went and moved the rocks right onto there. To move it from Sawmill Point to the actual bridge, this is a stone cart. And this is the process they went through to go and make that bridge in 1861. I just thought that was fun facts.
By the way, while we're transporting different things, there's the sand barge that you can see the bones emerging there on Steep Hill Beach, right? But at the same time
Yes.
that we were bringing rocks from Rockport, both here but also downtown Boston, were we not also exporting sand to Boston?
Absolutely. If say like you wanted to make some cement, some concrete, you would get the cement from Maine, the lime from Maine, and you would pull into, actually Sandy Point was a great place to go and load up a ship worth there and bring it right into downtown Boston. Yeah, a lot of Boston is made with our sand coming out of on Plum Island, off Sandy Point. So I just did a couple close-ups of the County Street Bridge just because I just love the bridge. I think it's a wonderful one. When they built the bridge, that allowed them to open up this area for industrial use. Industrial use, this is the Ipswich Woolen Mill. It was built in 1863. So if 1861, the County Street Bridge was built, this is 1863. This building right here was built. It was a hosiery. First they turned wool into yarn and yarn into hosiery. Again, I think socks. So this would be wool socks versus where EBSCO today would be cotton socks. But apparently we were the sock capital of the area. This is if you cut all the trees down and you are on North Main Street, looking down where the Scientologists are. If you stand in that property and you look down the hill, that's where this photograph was taken. You just have to remove all the trees that are now there. A couple of fun facts. This is Turkey Shore Road. This is where Hurd's Distillery was. This is the wharf that I was talking about earlier. I'm not sure what this building is, but I'm quite curious about what a 3-story building is on that side of that property. Now it's nice houses. These houses still exist. I can't remember this hill. I need some help on that.
Heartbreak.
It's almost Hill in Ipswich, I just can't remember the name of it.
Heartbreak?
It is Heartbreak? Thank you. And then this is a sawmill right here, the grist mill is right over here, and then these, the tannery is right that one right there. So this is now an industrial neighborhood. Basically from this building that way, it's an industrial neighborhood. And it is the woolen mill.
Did socks get made for the Civil War people?
Yes.
That's what I heard, that this was a big
So-
distributor of socks.
Well, here's the Ipswich woolen mill here.
Yeah.
They made woolen socks for the Union Army.
Yeah.
They also made woolen blankets out on Willowdale Mill. You call it Foot Brothers today. If you go to Foot Brothers, that was the Willowdale Mill. They made blankets, woolen blankets for the Union Army there also. So here is well, this is another view. This is from County Street. The people are currently standing on the County Street Bridge right there. I swear the railing hasn't changed. Yeah. So just another view, and obviously here's the sawmill on Sawmill Point. This is now the river walk. You can walk along there. It's a great place to sit and watch the tide come in and out and have a nice picnic. And our church we're sitting in right there would be on the other side of that roof right there. Since we're talking 1867, we cannot but help talk a little bit about the Civil War and how the Civil War affected the town of Ipswich. In 1867, Ipswich was a population of approximately 3,000. And it was basically 3,000 white Protestants. There were no Catholics in town for the most part. It was basically white Protestants. And so out of those 3,000 people that lived in Ipswich, they raised 5 different companies for the Civil War. There was 462 men from Ipswich went and served during it. So that's 3,000 people, and we'll say half are women, half men. So that's 1,500 men in the town of Ipswich. Roughly 1 out of 3 men in Ipswich served in uniform during the Civil War from Ipswich. And that is quite typical of every town in the entire Union and also in the Confederacy down south. During the war, 60 different, these others, 462 men that served, 60 of them died. 25 of them were killed in action during battles. 35 of them died of disease. It was more common to die of disease during the Civil War than it was to die by being wounded or shot. There were 75 men that were wounded. There were 18 of them that were captured, and 7 of them died in captivity at Andersonville. There were 92 men that were discharged for disability. So almost half the people that enlisted in Ipswich either died, were wounded, were captured, or were discharged because of disability. Because they were living on 1 ear of corn for 3 months, and their stomach just couldn't handle it anymore. And they basically started breaking down as soldiers. I just want to quickly tell 3 quick stories of 3 Civil War veterans, because these are probably the more, if you were alive in 1867, these are the stories you would know about. This first gentleman, his name is Thomas Ellsworth. He grew up right down the street here, and he received the Medal of Honor. One of 2 people in Ipswich that received the Medal of Honor, the highest award you can get for bravery. What he did at the Battle of Honey Hill in South Carolina on November 30th, 1864, he was with a black regiment. He had been at Gettysburg, and with the 2nd Massachusetts, he was wounded at Gettysburg, right in the ankle, and then when he was recovering from those wounds, he became a lieutenant and joined a black regiment. One of 2 black regiments from Massachusetts. Everybody knows the story of the Massachusetts 54th Black Regiment. He was part of the 55th. The 55th fought next door to the 54th on every single battle and every single thing. They just didn't make a movie about those guys. So this gentleman is famous because at the Battle of Hunting Hill, they charged a fort and were repulsed. The commander of the brigade was on a horse. His horse was shot. The horse landed on top of the gentleman. So this guy stopped along with a black soldier. The 2 of them lifted the horse up, pulled the general out. At that point, they were under a lot of fire. The black gentleman was hit by a cannonball and was vaporized, so we do not know his name. And this guy picked up the general and started carrying him back to his own lines through a swamp. and they were shot at the entire way. The general was wounded 3 different times as he was being carried, but eventually he saved his life. The general wound up being a senator in Congress, and he wound up being the minority leader in Congress by 1890s, and he decided that this gentleman, since he saved his life and risked it so much, he deserved the Medal of Honor. And so he received the Medal of Honor. He wound up settling in California, and he's buried in California now.
Who was the guy who saved the general?
You had to ask me, and I know. I have the information right here, but I will get back to you. Nobody had heard of. Okay, then I can't help but, I love telling this story. Joseph Manning. He grew up right here on High Street. So Joseph Manning, he received the Medal of Honor, and you can see him there. And he's in the process of receiving his Medal of Honor by what he did. This was the Battle of Fort Sanders outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. This was on November 29, 1863. He was in this fort, and he was with his regiment. And it was a cold night, and he kind of wandered away because there was a fire behind the fort, and he was warming himself by the fire. The Confederates attacked the fort, and his regiment was pulled out of the fort, and a new regiment was put into the fort, but he didn't know that because he was off by the fire. So he ran into the fort a little late, realized that his friends were not with him, they were someplace else, and the Confederates attacked the fort 4 or 5 times. They repulsed, and there was about 200 Confederates that were wounded or stuck at the base of the fort. You can see here's the fort, and there's a ditch right here, and there's about 200 Confederates stuck at the base of this ditch. Joseph Manning's regiment was ordered to go around the fort and go capture these 200 men. Joseph Manning, being a good soldier that he was going to try to catch up to his regiment. He decided to take a shortcut. He jumped over the wall. His regiment got delayed. He is the only soldier to land in the middle of 200 Confederates by himself. So this man now is surrounded by 200 Confederates. All he has is an unloaded rifle with a bayonet, so he immediately runs over to the nearest soldier that holds a flag and demanded his surrender, and the guy surrendered to him along with 200 other soldiers. By the time they surrendered to him, the rest of the regiment caught up to him, and they escorted him back into the fort. For that, he was awarded one of the very first Medal of Honors. This is November of 1863. The Medal of Honor was actually created in October of 1863. So I just thought that was a pretty cool story, and he happens to be buried up here in the Highland Cemetery. And I can't talk about the Civil War without talking about Nathaniel Shatswell. For those that grew up in town, you knew Shatswell School. You see Colonel Shatswell. Well, he's the real deal. And this is Nathaniel Shatswell with his horse. Unfortunately, his horse didn't make it through the Civil War. He was killed at Cold Harbor. But there he is, 1863. He was one of the very first people in Ipswich to enlist. He served from April of 1861 all the way to Appomattox in 1865. So he went through the entire war. And he was with the first, he enlisted in the 14th Massachusetts Regiment. They became the 1st Massachusetts Heavy Artillery. He spent 1861, 1862, and 1863 hanging out in Washington, D.C., in the forts and defending Washington, D.C., all the way to 1864. He did not see any combat until the Overland Campaign, until General Grant was trying to go and beat Robert E. Lee in the last son of the war. After the Battle of the Wilderness and the Battle of Spotsylvania, Grant had, at this point, had about 40,000 casualties out of an army of 120,000, so 1/3 of the people in his army were casualties at this point, and he needed more troops. So he emptied out 50,000 troops around Washington, D.C., including this gentleman, and so he showed up and was marching towards the front. And he was going down the Fredericksburg Road on his way to Spotsylvania Courthouse with his regiment when General Ewell went around the Union Army and tried to attack it from behind and tried to attack their logistics, so where the food was coming from. And there was only one regiment in the way, and that was the 1st Massachusetts Heavy Artillery. And it was led by a guy named Major Rowe. In the first 30 seconds of the battle, Major Rowe was shot 14 times, and so Major Shatswell took over. Our local hero took over. And This is the actual battlefield. This is about where he was standing when Major Shatswell was wounded. It depends on who you talk to and which records you read. He was either hit by a piece of artillery shell or he was shot. Either way, he was shot in the neck and he was bleeding. So his soldiers picked him up and carried him from where the monument is, down this lane, that was a road back in 1864, to a barn where this house is today. And they patched him up, they wrapped him up, they bandaged him up, and the battle was waging back and forth, and the Union was starting to lose this battle. And Shatswell decided he was in for a penny, he was in for a pound. So he basically took his bandage and left his hat and ran back down this lane right here, back to where here, rallied his regiment and attacked down the hill. The hill is actually from this monument down to that house. They call that a hill. And so they ran down. The Confederates were all down where the street is here, and they went back and forth. This is the bloodiest day in Ipswich's history. In 375 years of Ipswich history, May 19th, 1864, at this spot right here, more people in Ipswich were killed, wounded, and captured than all others combined. That's First World War, Second World War, Revolution, Peacock War, you name the wars, combine them all. More people from Ipswich died at this, and were more wounded and more captured here at this one day. It is the bloodiest day in Ipswich history. And I just felt like I needed to tell that little bit of story. And then when they got back years later, Colonel Shatswell organized the local movement to go and put our monument up, and so there are 42 people of the 60 people that died in Ipswich are on this monument up here on Town Hill. At this point, I've talked a little too long. Sorry to do this.
No.
So any other questions? And I'm about to finish up and let Jane take off. Yes, sir.
How many people were captured in that one battle?
In that one battle, I think it's 35. And if I remember, I have it written down over here. I'm just trying not to go over my references. I think it was 35 people captured. I'm sorry, were wounded. There were 5 that died. 2 died that day. 3 died of their wounds later. They are buried at Fredericksburg, Arlington National Cemetery, and in Ipswich. And there was 2 people that were captured and brought to Andersonville prison, of which they wound up dying in Andersonville prison. So yes.
Comment.
Yes, sir.
The Medal of Honor that you comment about there
Yes.
was freely given during the Civil War.
It was freely given for gallantry. For example, this gentleman right here, he was, when the battle, the Virginia and the Honor and Merrimack, when that was happening, he was cited for gallantry because he risked his life to rescue a bunch of sailors that were swimming from the sunken ship called the Columbia. And when that sank, he went there. He brought a gun along and kept shooting at the Merrimack, or we call it the Virginia. So he was cited for bravery multiple times. Yes, if you captured a flag, you were given a Medal of Honor. But in the case of these 2 gentlemen from Ipswich, they actually truly did some serious heroic things, above and beyond the call of duty. Unusual stories. They did not have what we call today a Silver Star. They did not have Bronze Stars. They did not have...
That's the difference.
Yeah, that's a big difference. So you either were cited for gallantry, where they basically put your name down on a piece of paper and said you were really gallant, and then eventually had the Medal of Honor. Yes. Other questions before I turn it over? Okay.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah, that's speak louder.
Point your mic.
Where do you, oh, I
Can you help?
I'm not from Ipswich, so that was fascinating. I mean, I've done all my research in Newburyport, the other end of town. I'm just going to give a brief overview of the architectural history of Ascension. I started going here about 6 years ago and was just really struck with how beautiful it is, and I just thought I'd like to talk about it. So this is the earliest photograph we have of the church. And Episcopal worship began in Ipswich in 1839 with a small group of parishioners, although services were intermittent. During the Civil War years, more and more immigrants settled in Ipswich to work in the mills, and the need for an Episcopal church grew. Services were again offered in 1861 thanks to,
Oh, sorry.
thanks to,
I'll get the hang of this.
okay, we've never done this before. Services were again offered in 1861 thanks to Dr. Joseph Palmer, a physician who moved to Ipswich in 1849. Could we have the next one? There, this is, there, that's Reverend Smith, but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Through Dr. Palmer and his wife Caroline and their friend John Clothy, an Ipswich merchant, an Episcopal congregation was organized. Early services were held in the Palmer's home and then in the newly erected Methodist Church, which is located on North Main Street and was built in 1859. As church membership continued to grow and the church was organized with vestry and wardens, the next step was to build a permanent home for the growing congregation. Could you go back to the advertisement?
Can do. That's what you want.
Oh, right, sorry. Okay. The Appleton family and their many associates stepped in to help, particularly Daniel Fuller Appleton. Appleton was a businessman who at the age of 21, after acquiring the Waltham Watchworks, moved to Staten Island, New York to begin his career in the watch and jewelry industry, although he and his family always spent their summers and holidays at the farm here. In New York, the Appletons were members of the New York City Ascension Church.
You mean that one?
That one. Daniel was a vestryman and warden. The rector of the church, John Cotton Smith, was married to Daniel's sister Harriet, and therefore part of the Appleton family and the town of Ipswich. It was a wonderful synchronicity of family and church. After looking at numerous sites and locations, the vestry settled on the County Street site, and in 1869, the cornerstone of our new church was laid. The first service was held in 1870. This is James Renwick, who is the architect of the church. The design of the church has been attributed to him. From a prominent New York family, Renwick was a parishioner at Ascension in New York, and shortly knew the Appletons as they both moved in the same social circles. Although not formally trained as an architect, Renwick came from a family of engineers. His ability and interest in building design were nurtured through his cultivated background, which granted him early exposure to travel and through a broad cultural education that included architectural history. He studied engineering at Columbia University, which he entered at age 12. He received an MA 3 years later. On graduating, he took a position as structural engineer with the Erie Railroad and was engineer on the Croton Reservoir and Aqueduct, which was a massive project that supplied water to New York City. But Renwick was, in his heart, an architectural designer rather than an engineer. He was an early proponent of the Gothic Revival style in the U.S. It is thought that Renwick studied with Augustus Pugin, an English architect, designer, artist, and critic who is principally remembered for his pioneering role in the Gothic Revival architecture. Renwick received his first major commission at the age of 25 when he won a competition to design the Episcopal Grace Church in New York City, which is now a National Historic Landmark and one of the city's greatest treasures. It was designed in the French Gothic Revival style. The Grace Church signaled the beginning of a remarkable architectural career that included many well-known buildings in our American architectural canon. In 1853, he was chosen the architect for St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, his best-known work celebrated throughout the world. This is a sidebar. I grew up in New York City, and my birthday is St. Patrick's Day, so we usually were there quite a bit on the day. And the St. Patrick's Day parade was always in front of the church. He went on to design the castle, the Smithsonian Institution's first building, which was a major influence in the style. The earliest buildings at Vassar College, the Corcoran Art Museum, which is now the Renwood Gallery in DC. He designed a home in New York City for his parents that was later occupied by Mark Twain, and additionally designed a number of Episcopal and Roman Catholic churches throughout the U.S. So what is the Gothic Revival style?
That one?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's an interior view of St. Patrick's. I thought that window was just pretty staggering.
You mean this?
That. So the Gothic Revival style is basically based on medieval architecture, and the main deal is the pointed arches underneath it in various different configurations, but very extenuated. And this is just a little bit more of the kind of deep tracery that you would find. If you can go back. The Gothic Revival style is part of the mid-19th century picturesque and romantic movement in architecture, reflecting the public's taste at that time for buildings inspired by historical designs, the earliest being Greek Revival, which was based on classical forms of ancient Greek and Roman ruins, which were unearthed in the 1830s and had a huge impact on architecture at that time. Gothic Revival is a romanticized version of medieval architecture and is promoted as an especially suitable design for rural houses and churches with its complex and irregular shapes and forms fitting well into the natural landscape, and more high-style versions as seen in cathedrals and industrial buildings.
Okay.
These are just a couple of examples of a Gothic Revival church, sort of at a similar scale of our church. And then there's one more. So that's sort of, you can see the arched windows, the really steep roof. So, yes, back to Ascension. Arched windows, really steep roof. The other thing about Gothic Revival, there was sort of a twig style thing going where it was in rural areas where he would make a church sort of rustic and, reminiscent of the woods. This was our first porch. I kind of wish we still had the same thing. But you can see the very steep roofs and the arched windows. So the other thing I wanted to point out in the Gothic design is these, I don't know if you see these, they're called trefoils, and it represents the Trinity, the three points of the Trinity. And while I was sitting here, I noticed that they're not all over the place. So when you're here, take a look. And they're in the, another symbol. So there's a lot of subtle details that you might not look at, but when you put them all together, they come together. Once more, shortly before his death, Reverend Cotton Smith gave Ascension perhaps his last gifts. In 1881, the New York Ascension was undergoing a major renovation, and Reverend Smith was instrumental in saving some of the original fittings of the church, which he gave to Ascension. And part of it is this entire backdrop with the trefoils, and these panels were in Ascension in New York, and they were installed here, as well as the standing candle holders and the furniture. So in 1882, Ascension in New York underwent a massive renovation. The church was basically configured into a new building, and he was generous enough to give his design to us, which really dramatically changed the church. In 1882, Reverend Smith died, and in honor of his friendship and generosity, Ascension was renamed Ascension Memorial. Although not part of tonight's architectural tour, sorry, Frank, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the organs that have been in our church. The earliest instrument was installed in 1884 and was actually in that corner, made by Hook and Hastings. It was replaced in 1900 and again replaced most recently in 1974 when our present disc organ, Opus 62, was installed. In addition to its Gothic Revival design and details, Ascension is blessed to have an array of magnificent stained glass windows. My favorite. rose window in the north as given in memory of Susan Cowles Appleton. Perhaps the most historical and rare window is not this window, and not that one.
Nope.
We had a hard time with the slides. This one. And that's over there, unfortunately, in the corner, off to you. Tucked in the little corner. And there's one after this guy. Is that it? No, keep on. There it is. Okay. No, that one. There's two windows. This is probably our most historical and rare window. Unfortunately, it's right there. It's the Madonna of the Lilies, and it was designed, it's in memory of Julia Randall Appleton, and it was designed by the late 19th, early 20th century stained glass maker John LaFarge. LaFarge developed a way of making stained glass by layering glass in different colors, which she achieved deep colors in a very angel-y effect by doing that. Intact LaFarge windows are somewhat rare, and Ascension is fortunate to have the window, and we were also fortunate enough to be able to restore it to its original condition, which was quite a project. I invite you on your own time to take a look at these works of art while you're wandering around, but we can just go through the other windows just to give you an example of what we have. I also, when I did this talk, I was in the church during the day, and I walked into and I thought, there's no money. I really agree. Okay, and the other, in addition to the windows, we have a number of beautiful memorial plaques all around the church as well. And I think it's worth it if you haven't, just to walk around the church in the daytime, and you can see the plaques in the windows. And additionally, we have, These are traditional icons designed by our parishioner Rebecca Taylor, and they're over here on this wall. One is from St. Simon and one is St. Luke. And Rebecca also designed and painted the small icons that we see on the altar and different areas of the church. Regrettably, we do not have time tonight to review all the alterations of Ascension and its grounds have undergone since 1869, but it is an active community with changing needs and have many. The most obvious, and the most obvious, and I like that a lot, is our exterior big changes are the construction of the parish house in 1895, the removal of the steeple with the Appleton Bell, construction of the new bell tower, and the construction of the Blue Hall in 1960. And there's been some landscaping changes. The George Washington oak tree died and was replaced in the 70s by the beech tree we now have today. So I'm ending on a note with the rose window because I think it really symbolizes what this church feels to me. We can catalog and write the history of the church, the vestry meetings, the biographies of the rectors who have served, but as an architectural historian, what is most important to me is how these bits and pieces of knowledge and architecture fit together. Goethe described architecture as frozen music, a crystal clear note in the song. Over my lifetime, I have visited many churches, large and small, and I was attracted to Ascension because, among other things, its beautiful and elegant architecture. Next time you are in Ascension, or not, notice how the building makes you feel, how there is a sense of being held in the unity of spirit, manifested in the design of the church, the soaring rafters, the warm embrace of the dark wood and pale yellow walls, the ever-changing light through the stained glass windows, echoing our changing lives and spiritual journey. There's nothing better than being in Ascension on a brilliant summer day or a snowy winter morning, and soaring organ music and choir voices with nature's light moving through the church, knowing that spirit, love, and God are everywhere and in everything.
Thank you. There are goodies that way, including cheese. Everyone loves cheese. And Christian Holbrook from Appleton Farms has brought his cheese with us. So refreshments this way, questions this way. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, what's your name? Joe Nelson.
Joe Nelson.